The human interface is much, much, much slower. It takes a long time to build the relationships. It takes a long time to build the following. And when I say long, I'm talking about like a few years, not like a few months, a few weeks. And the being patient about it and then working with that and experimenting with that will get you further than on just your pure engineering skills.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are waiting for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory, walk. Warning.
This is a public service announcement. The Walk in Victory podcast is where we have conversations purposed to evolve lives. You may not want to evolve. Then tune into another bleeping podcast. Everyone else, enjoy the show. And here's our host.
Good afternoon, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or good day, what time you're listening or where you're listening from, but it's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. If you are living not under rock or anything, then you understand how important technology is today, and especially technology in the standpoint for entrepreneurs, where it can help streamline, automate. Like us, I've been up all day setting in some automations stuff for the podcast because I'm able to take some stuff off my plate that I wouldn't necessarily be able to take off my plate. And now I don't have to worry about hiring an editor or hiring someone to do some of the things that I can quickly do. And I spend one day getting an entire week's worth of work done. And the better at it I become, that day becomes shorter. The window becomes a little bit tighter because it may take me a while to understand the technology. It may take a while for me to really learn it and get the nuances down, but that doesn't mean I have to shy away from it because it may be uncomfortable at first. And then it is like riding a bike. I remember when I first started riding my bike, I used to fall all the time. And then became efficient and could only go straight. I couldn't make turns really well. And then I kept riding and eventually I made turns and then I was doing tricks. And that's the progression that we're in. And because technology is moving at such a fast pace, we don't know what tools will best suit us or to help us. Because right now there's some youth, young adults, middle age, some seniors who's coming up with some great ideas and they're doing a little tech startup and they're running it, their tests and they're calling people in the room and they're trying to figure out if their product, if something that they've envisioned, imagined, can actually be beneficial in the marketplace. And when they do that, and they get to that place where when it moves from schematics to testing and from testing to projecting, from projecting to whatever other maturation processes that take place, they may call on our next guest. And we're going to talk about what it looks like to be in the tech startup industry, especially at such an exciting time as this. And we're going to focus in on what the landscape before, because a lot of times the public doesn't really know that all of these things are going on behind the scenes. So we're just feeling like we're in the middle of a tech bubble, a huge tech burst, but it might have been going on for a long time and we just weren't aware of it. So we're going to find out all of these answers and more. And if you're interested, get your notebook, pen and pad out because we're about to dive deep. Vladimir, how are you?
I'm doing good, NaRon. Glad to be here.
Oh, thank you for joining me. Let's start with what it is that you do and how much would you like to share about yourself?
Yeah, no, sure thing. Well, I have a bigger background as an engineer and an electrical engineer, and I had a career going through finance and then eventually aerospace. And now I am a business coach. So I've started my own businesses. I help others, people start businesses. And now what I focus on is I want to help all the people who are trying to start businesses, especially in tech, how to get from idea to implementation. Like, what does it take for you to understand the market? What kind of questions do you need to ask of your prospective customers? And what does it require? So I found that to be the most impactful place that it can be on the pipeline of entrepreneurship and scaling. And that's how I find value these days.
How important was your previous life to what it is that you're doing now? The analytical mind, being an engineer, working in the financial realm, where I'm pretty sure you learned some things that will help entrepreneurs, and being able to blend those two things that you had it under your belt together for what it is that you're doing at the current moment.
Yeah. I think the mind works the best when it's exposed to the context where the problem is. And I see the engineering and non engineering or tech or not tech professionals kind of part of the same pipeline. The non tech generally generates the problem statement, and then the technology people take that problem statement in part and implement it. I was in both sides, so it helps me kind of cross the gap, but also helps me explain well why certain things are necessary as part of communication between tech and non-tech people, and why certain technologies or behaviors need to be adjusted for the optimal outcome in those cultures.
Is there an intersection between electrical engineering, tech, technology? Like, how was that journey?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. So there's several phases of technology, right? So there's hardware, there's software, there's perhaps management. For me, it's more about problem solving. And when you
Mm.
solve problem in the context of a problem statement, like each electrical engineer, each software person, each lead gets a problem statement within the context of their language, within the context of their environment. So this way, when they start solving the problems, they are able to pull some things from resources from one side or another, pull some things from their experience, and start solving problems. So to me, a lot of engineering is mostly figuring out how to solve problems. So to me, that has been the thing which I took away from doing engineering.
Yeah. So now you're at this space. Tell me about, how did you know that this felt right for you? When did you
Yeah,
know, like, you were doing finance and you were doing this and you say, honey, you know what? This is what the direction I'm going to go in.
yeah. So I'd say it wasn't right away. It wasn't right away.
Mhm.
The best way I think I can describe it, if you're using a flashlight navigating a dark city without electricity, you have no idea where to go, right? And the only way you know where to go is by going where you are and shining the light and kind of learning about the places you go. After a while, certain patterns start arriving. Like, okay, on this Broadway street, there's like the best restaurants. I'll go there more often. And you kind of try it on yourself. You try it on your psyche. You try it on your culture, and you're trying to see which way that goes. And to me, that was first transition. Okay, the first transition was not really a transition. I had to get my first job. I got it in finance. I went to school in New York, was an engineer, but the most jobs were available were in finance. I was young, I was like
Okay.
20 something years old. I had to get a job. I got a job where it was available, which was in technology and finance. Over time, it was not feeling well for me where everything I was putting in was not equivalent to the outcomes that I was getting back. I was compensated well, but I felt that I was not seeing outcome of my work. I was not seeing the correlation. I was not seeing proportionate kind of recognition or maybe even like implementation. A lot of my work was sort of wasted, was put on a shelf and somewhere else as part of a larger organization. And when I was raising questions like, how about we do these things differently? How about we use a different approach? They were kind of ignored, but not necessarily from perspective of like, hey, go back to just doing your work, but more there are no venues for a lot of middle level people or even like low level people to change larger organizations because that's not how
Mhm.
I see the results of my work. And I want to also be the owner of the outcome and take all the risks from that perspective. I had a middle step. I went to MBA and I thought that was actually would be one of the ways that people in larger companies will recognize, whoa, this guy is so smart. He got the MBA. Let me give him a different situation. Doesn't work that way. You hired for the role that you're supposed to be doing. There's no like magical thing with just getting an MBA. But what happened during MBA, I learned a way of doing entrepreneurship structurally, like
Mhm.
how to do it with the most de-risked approaches. Now, you still have a lot of risk and so on, but there are paths that other people have tried. There are paths that other people have been following that work a little bit better than just kind of like doing it on your own. And with that in mind, myself and another classmate of mine, we started a peer-to-peer lending company, which we ran for about 6 months until we realized there was no traction for our business idea. which was fine, but it felt invigorating. It felt like every decision I was making, I saw the impact right away. And that helped me transition into a different role with a wealth management startup. I was a second person, which then took off. Now, I'm not saying this is like my responsibility. I was not like my efforts were outcome of it. Part of my efforts, hopefully, were part of that. But we grew that company from 2 people to about 150 over 7 years. We
Mm.
sold it to a large financial institution, but it was all within the context of finance. So I was able to learn that journey of how to grow the company, how to hire people, how to set up agenda, how to manage large meetings, and great experience to have. But during that experience, I learned again. So like, even though I loved working at startup, I not necessarily was working very well for me within the world of finance. So just something was not resonating for me. And I decided, like, let me try to pursue something else, which perhaps overlaps my heart's desires. And in that moment, it was aerospace. So I networked for a little bit in large companies and also within startup community. And I was able to land a role first as an advisor and then converted as a full-time role as a third person at aerospace startup. And I thought that was like a dream come true. Yeah, I get to touch really cool stuff. We launched 2 satellites in orbit. We were able to get the data from there. We were able to get images. And that's where I thought my everything was accomplished. And it's true. Like I was getting closer and closer and closer. Like I started understanding better how that city with a flashlight is laid out, like where to go to get that sort of mental satisfaction. But what the outcome of that experience was, interestingly, that space market is not organized like all the other commercial markets on the earth, I guess, on the planet, in the world, whatever. And they have pretty much just one client, and that's the government. And 90% of the products that you sell go for the government. You might be selling to other startups, you might be selling to other companies, but those companies very much dependent on government revenue. So if the government revenue gets turned off, the whole sector dies. Like there's no other consumer of space technology other than the government. And to me, it felt a little bit off, like in a sense, like I was brought up in this with this experience of having a commercial market outcome. And I kind of started thinking like, are there other ways that I can search for more impact with where I can feel more satisfied with the work that I'm doing? And this is where I arrived to business coaching for tech founders, where I know that a lot of engineers, a lot of scientists, a lot of technical people are very smart, but they're smart in their own way for technology's sake. And I wanted to see like, what if I help them unleash all of that potential, all that problem solving skills in the business sense? Wouldn't that be great? Like we have to accept like people who are the most educated, they know something. I'm not saying they're best at everything, but they know something about how to solve problems. So it felt like they just needed a translator layer as some sort of like gap manager who helps them explain how the business world works in analogies from engineering. And this is where I decided to focus my time for now, so I can enable this part of population to gain the great business success and thus helping us all with their inventions and their approaches.
And it's funny because I like the way that you use that like a gap. You say gap management or
Yeah, yeah.
yes, and I like that because we hear so many horror stories about the smart guy who comes up with this brilliant plan and doesn't really understand the nuances of business, and they're taken advantage of. Whether their ideas are taken away, shelved, or some kind of manipulation from some because they're swimming in the wrong pond, so to say. They
Uh-huh.
don't really understand the nuances of business, and it's not easy to come up with a better idea. And we all walk away. Not we all. If you've been in business, you walked away from a deal on the short of the end of the stick, and you walk away saying, "I'll get them next time." But sometimes the next time doesn't come. Sometimes the motivation is lost. So hiring you will help them to be able to navigate through the weeds from idea to launch. How does that work?
Yeah, yeah. So I come in to help at different stages of the company. Usually I work with a lot of pre-series A technology startups. I could come in even at pre-idea stage. There is a misconception in the market and something that I had to get out of my system too, that you need to have an idea to start anything. And the thing is, it's it's good if you have an idea, but it's also okay if you don't, because in the end, you're you're not responsible for finding the best idea in general. You need to find the best idea for the need or a problem that the market has. And now
Yeah.
this is where the whole agile and lean startup methodology comes in. And the way you find out need from the market is you ask them. I know it sounds very simple, but it's kind of is. It's like we need to step over our own egos and say, like, we have to come up with a solution and ideas for everything. No, we don't. We're only on this planet for so long. We only talk to so many people. How the hell are you supposed to know everything, especially in everything industry? There is no way. So be a little bit more, apply more humility, like accept who you are and realize that you're already super skillful and able to do the things that require to get the idea. And finding that idea requires you maybe talking to 100 people in the sector of your interest. And once that's done, you will see some patterns. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to find like that $1 billion ideas, but I guarantee if you ask right questions from the 100 people, they will tell you their problems, they will tell you their pains, and some of them will might want to pay you to solve their problems and pains. And that's where we kind of talk about the idea origination. So that's one path, right? Another path, we also talk with people who might have already been as part of their startup or their company for like a couple of months, maybe even a year or two, and the traction is not happening there. Again, this is where I can come in. We can talk about it, what's happening, what we have done so far. Have we been focusing 90% on R&D and none of the business development? Let's talk about it. How do you think about it? Are you a perfectionist? Is that what the thing's slowing you down? Are you not an agile-minded person? Well, let's work through that too. Like, what's slowing us down? What's preventing us from making that revenue? Or are we just in the wrong business? But sometimes you don't know. And like, how are we going to test it, right? If you would ask me, I don't know, 10 years ago, are Crocs a great invention? Like, are they great shoes? I'm going to say, oh, what are you talking about? They're ugly. Who's going to wear that? Like, and then to double it, now we have those special stickers or like pins that you can put in the Crocs holes. Who could have thought of that, right? Market is not rational, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It just is, right? And our minds, when they're set up logically, having a hard time to predict any of that. And what we can do, like the weather in the ocean or the heights of the waves, we can observe those trends and follow them and measure them. But that has nothing to do with logic.
It's funny that someone, if I was to sit down and talk with you and we just talked about your background without knowing exactly what you think, what you do, and some of your philosophies, especially the whole logic piece, that you would come across as one who is highly logical. And usually highly logical people are not like risk takers or visionaries, or because we talk ourselves, and
Yes.
we'll be able to
Yeah.
see something and we'll give it all the reasons why it can't work. How are you able to be able to bridge the gap and
Yeah.
balance between vision, imagination, and logic?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I look at it more as trying to understand what systems are at work and what the predictability of that system is, because that has logic. And the system, like a lot of things that we, let's say, as logical people do, or as developers or engineers do, we have a problem statement that somebody wrote for us. There are inputs, there are outputs. Please design a solution around this, and that has kind of a box around. And the way that I deal with things that are illogical is I try to put boxes, but what not with certainty of output, but with probability of output. So in a sense, like, what are the all different things that can happen in this scenario? What is the probability for each of them? And how can we impact each of those scenarios ourselves? And in the end, it is a closed loop system. Like, there's only 100% of probability, and it can only be distributed a certain way. Now, we cannot be 100% sure how it's going to be distributed, but we can make a bet. And over time, the more bets we make, the more likely we succeed just by the law of large numbers. So when you
See,
convert,
no, see, I think that's your competitive advantage, because a money guy or a business coach wouldn't be able to sit down and, if I'm a tech guy, I'm talking a certain language that I'm like, they don't understand. They're not really listening to what I'm saying, because the money man or they're only seeing the bigger picture. Oh man, this to work, and oh, this can't work. But if when they're talking to you, do you feel like there's a sense that they feel like, I'm so comfortable because he did it? Do you think that's one of your competitive advantages, the fact that you can get it?
yeah, I think you were spot on. And I think my role generally is described as translator, and there are different translators in different kind of groups and organization. They're usually the loneliest people is because they can get both sides, but nobody else gets them. So they kind of hang out. Now I have friends. I mean, I hope. I mean, there are some friends I have, but generally it's a sort of isolating area. But you're right. That is the thing that you do very well because you kind of know one side and the other, and then through analogies you bring them both. One analogy which I bring in as part of this is that the smartest lawyer and the smartest doctor will not be able to talk professionally to one another because of their jargon, because of their language, and they have to resort to the basic analogies in order to explain to each other what is happening in their
No
workspace, right?
longer.
And sometimes our engineering mind, sometimes our logical mind, sometimes our accolades of minds. They like, we need to use the most words from our own context, the most complex one, to show the world how smart we are.
Well,
Now, you will show the world how smart you are, but you'll be by yourself talking to no audience. You're not going to be able to sell anything you're going to be able to sell. So in the end, what you're trying to do is you're trying to speak in engineering terms, you're trying to debug and adjust the human interface to the right words, to the right pace, to the right tone, to the right culture, to the right context, so the people you're talking to get it. And it is your responsibility, not just theirs.
Yeah, so the onus is on you if you're going to build a client base, if you're going to talk to a number of students. How do I get the message across um, that they will understand? And if I'm talking to a client, how do I get the message across that they can trust me with the knowledge too? Because I think that sometimes in coaching, there has to be a delicate balance between I'm coming to you for one thing, but I need you to understand this other thing. Do you
Yes.
see that?
Yes, absolutely. And coaching is about helping to co-think with with your
Mm,
client, but in their context. Now, sometimes mentorship is appropriate. Like, we could ask somebody, "Hey, how do you say something in Spanish?" And you're like, "I don't speak any Spanish. Like, there is no way I can speak Spanish." Then you can put your mentoring hat on and say, like, "Okay, say this, say this, say this, say this." But in most times, it's kind of like, how do you use a flashlight and how do you turn around? Tell me, what do you see on the left? Tell me, what do you see on the right? Tell me, if you're saying you're frustrated with this technology elite right now, have you asked them what will make them better? What will make them better? Right? And in the sense, you start asking questions in a way that only operate within the person context without telling them what to do. Because as a coach, I only have a sliver of like insight into somebody's context, maybe an hour, 2 hours, maybe I pre-read something on LinkedIn, but that's missing 90.9% of the context the person lives in. And so their priorities will always be higher, but I can still nudge them and guide them through the questions to help them explore how that relationship with a troubled tech lead or perhaps their own understanding of the business will get better.
yeah. So when you get to that place where you're now understanding your purpose, that this is and now that old journey was to get me to land me here. When did you realize that you brought a unique voice to the tech coaching industry? How long did it take you to realize that, wow, I'm really onto something here?
Got it. I think it wasn't just through coaching, and I think the coaching was more like expression of the lessons. A
Mhm.
lot of lessons I realized when I was in management of a lot of technical resources, and a lot of similar conversations came up, like, business is stupid. What are they doing? Why are they doing it this way? Product has no idea how to put a product requirement. Don't they know ahead of time, like, what needs to be built? And I've had these conversations over the years in management, and that's when I took all of that and have put it into practice. Now, I know this podcast is between me and you, and I'm supposed to like blast the world how unique I am. I'm not. I'm not. I'm playing a role with a set of skills based on my experience. There are absolutely other people who are also are translators, and I don't want to like lay on them in any way. But I understand that within a certain market, like big pond, big ocean, there's only so many people which will focus on that, and kind of that is my advantage.
Yeah. So explain what you mean by big ocean, big pot.
Yes, absolutely. So when I go to, let's say, conferences of coaches, there is no way I'm the best coach there. And it could be, let's say, 500 people, which is kind of a small pond. In order for me to dominate that, I have to spend specific time on specific skills to build myself up to be super competitive, have so many reviews, and have probably support from all the people in there. It's hard for me to become big, even in that small pond. A different small pond, let's say 500 engineers and only one coach like myself. I'm the biggest coach there. So I'm the biggest
Yeah.
fish there, but I only have 500 clients maximum. But everybody knows me, and maybe that's what culturally and lifestyle I prefer. I kind of live there. I can also go into more larger ocean, but I will have to require to develop more of a marketing and branding approach in order to start getting those systems and clients into my purview in a way that we can start to relate, which you don't have to do in the small pond where, sorry, a lot of relationships are based on personal interactions.
Wow. So when you started teaching, you have your client base, but now you're starting to teach new up and coming entrepreneurs or engineers. What was that like? And why did you jump into that particular pond or ocean?
I see. I'd say I looked into my experience and I saw like what is the most overlap that I have. It's the management, it's the engineering, it's the entrepreneurship, it's the pursuit of something greater than myself. And I was wondering what type of a client will embody a lot of those needs or some of those needs where it can help through coaching for them to get to the next level. So I'd say that was kind of like the framework for thinking about it.
Yeah. All right. So now here we are today. When you first got into the tech industry, and we see with OpenAI and all of these
Yeah.
things, how much of a learning curve, or how much do you have to continue to keep yourself abreast on some of the new technology or some of the new innovations that are coming up, and how do you keep up with it?
That's a great question. I think what I learned as far as being executive is that one, talk to people who know it very well, because if they have been in leadership of that sort of technology, they have learned already how to explain to others in simple ways of what actually is going on. It's like in the same
Mm,
way as you become professional over time, you have to speak in analogies. So like, hey, this is like this and like this, because those questions have been asked you for so often. So you talk to those people. Number two, you go to the conference where that technology is discussed or that sort of distribution of technology is presented, because you go to 5 or 6 presentations, you will probably understand 70%, 80% of high level information that is necessary for the concepts. The deep details probably would not matter as much, because one is they advance and they change, and also nobody is going to be paying you for those deep details. There's a reason why they're so deep, because they're only spoken by experts and specialists, and there's only so a need for so many of them. That's two. Number three, classes. So when AI came along, when came along, I took 6 months, 8 months courses. Now it went a little bit too deep from the high level perspective, but on Coursera, deep learning.ai, Andrew, who was running those classes, that's how I updated myself on some of the more technical aspects. Now, the thing is with coaching, though, most of the human psyche and behavior has not changed for the thousands of years. It has adjusted somewhat, but our behaviors are still kind of the same. So in this way, like it doesn't change as much as the technology. So in the sense, like you don't have to follow it as much. Now, the understanding context, understanding the tools, I would say those three approaches work for me very well.
So now that's a great point. But you have to understand the technology, and then you have to make analogies within the context of humans that really don't change. So the
Yes.
analogies can be the same, because we think of in terms of analogies anyway. So we can always find out this is just like this, or
Yep.
similar to this, or this is, but we're still speaking within the same context.
Yep.
So your learning on one end doesn't have to um, progress, because you understand the human side for the coaching, and that's who we're coaching. You're not coaching the machine. You're coaching humans.
So maybe I am. I don't know.
Yeah, once you've been at it for a while, you realize just the same way that you do with the technology, you make analogies. You walk a person walk in the door, and you're like, oh, they remind me of Sylvia that I had 10 years ago. She was a hairdresser. This is a baker, but they got similar personalities, and this is the way that I can deal and approach with them. What do you see within the next 3 to 4 years in the technology market, and how are we advancing speedily, or
Yeah.
is there going to be a screeching halt?
I'm going to say nobody knows. I think
Mhm.
we're running a really big experiment with AI LLM tools. I think we will get some of the questions answered, like in a sense, either current approaches that we're pursuing from LLM's perspective, AI perspectives will lead us to either AGI, the artificial general intelligence, or ASI, the super intelligence. Whether we have those tools, we'll get that answer. Number two, we'll also see the answer of how impactful that technology is to everyday life, right? Every new technology comes with greatest promise, like infinite money and so on. But over time, we get to see what it actually is useful for. We are seeing that LLMs and AI are being useful for customer support. We are seeing that it's being used in a legal world very effectively. We are being used like it's used as a companion or generative AI, generative arts, generative music, language translation approaches. So we're seeing that. But how much of impact will that make, and how many jobs will be displaced? How much retraining? How much not retraining? How much of a political problem that will become? What's going to happen to all the data owners on which the all of the AI has been trained? Will impact all that. I think a lot of those questions will be answered. All of this will make a significant progress in the next couple of years.
Thank you for what it is you do. This has been a very exciting conversation. When you are working on where it is that your company is going to go with the advance of all of this, how do you foresee you building out and getting the word out about what it is that you and your brand does?
Yeah, so I think one of my ways is talking to people at large, like through podcasts, I LinkedIn, going to conferences, and writing blog posts. I feel like it was the most engaging way of this sort of community and generating conversations.
Yeah, so you're taking it may seem like a slow, long route, but it's still a fast route because you're probably you're probably almost like a unicorn in what it is that you do. Not saying that you're the only one that does it, but
Yes.
there's very few people who can have conversations on both sides of the coin. It's either they're good at being an executive and understanding what's coming forward, and they have great foresight, and or they're good at technology and they just don't really know where to hang their hat at. But you're bridging and merging the two together. If you were talking to the engineer self way back when, and you was to have this conversation that some years from now, and this is what you'll be doing, what do you think that conversation would be like?
Well, that's a good one. I think about it all the time. Like if I at high school me or college me, I'd say it'd be a little bit more patient with the human
Mhm.
aspect because a lot of engineering kind of gives you a quick result. As soon as you try to put a new fix in, a new bug in, a new technology installed, you get to use it right away. The human interface is much, much, much slower. It takes a long time to build relationships. It takes a long time to build a following. And when I say long, I'm talking about like a few years, not like a few months, a few weeks. And being patient about it and then working with that and experimenting with that will get you further than on just your pure engineering skills.
Wow, that's a great conversation. Last thing, what books have inspired you or you're reading now that you would recommend to others? And it could be fiction or nonfiction, it doesn't have to be.
Wow, that's a good one. I'd say I'll speak for the recent ones. I think Wei Lee. Sorry that, and maybe I can send it to you. Some links after all the lights I see. She was the founder of ImageNet, and I like the how she approached. She's also an immigrant, so I loved her story of how she was surviving and how she went to Princeton and eventually she went to Stanford lab and how from scratch she was designing one of the biggest training sets that helped generate a lot of machine learning approaches that we use today.
Thank you very much. Hey, everyone. All of Vladimir's information is in the link in the description. It's right under his website is right under the title. There's the website link is there. And also on our website, he has a landing page there with all of this information, our social handles. If you are in the tech industry, we're not even talking, like he said, if you just have an idea. And I think that was a great point. There's some people think that you already have to come with an idea, but if you just think or shooting some things or kicking the ball around and you don't know where to go, now you know where to go. And Vladimir's information is there. Get that clarity call. It may not, you may not have anything, but you won't know unless you try, unless you take the first step. And on Walk in Victory, we don't walk making excuses. We don't walk with our head down. We don't walk with what ifs and should I haves. We walk in victory and we walk with our head up. And Vladimir is now part of the Walk in Victory family. Go and get that clarity call. Finally, we don't ask for cash apps, Venmos, Zells, or Apple Pays, but what we do ask that you hit and subscribe. That helps us get seen in algorithms. Our podcast has been growing. We are ranked now, and it's all because of you. So continue to do that. If you're listening on a platform where you can leave a review, leave that 5-star review. It really goes a long way, and that's your currency to us for the value that we give to you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Walk in victory. Peace.
Thank you, NaRon. Great being here.
Thank you.